Hi, Rhonda here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you would, please like my channel simply by clicking on the thumbs up button below. And if you'd like to, please subscribe to my channel. So today we're going to talk about the proposed sales and use tax allocation for the city of Glenwood, Arkansas. And I just want to remind everyone that this discussion is my own personal opinion, and I'm not steered either way by anyone. And I will use my notes, as I usually do, to keep myself on track. Folks, it's a roll of the dice for the citizens of Glenwood. It's not a matter of if there is a rate increase on your water or sewer bill. It's a matter of when and how much. Now, that's just my opinion, and here are some things for you to consider and hopefully to keep any potential rate increases to a minimum. So if you've listened to my YouTube audio of the April 24th open forum meeting, the attorney states right at around minute mark 18 that the state actually hasn't performed a rate study under the guidelines of Act 605. And that it's trial and error. That's a bit concerning to me, so I did a little research on my own, and this is what I've come up with. So I actually picked up the phone and talked to a couple of the rate study providers that are listed on the website for the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. It appears that 98% of independent rate studies that the providers that I've spoken to have performed resulted in an increase. Now, not under Act 605, because as the attorney said, there hadn't been any rate studies performed under that act. These are just independent rate studies. But 98%? Now, each municipality is different, but that's still a pretty high percentage of municipalities that had to undergo a rate increase as a result of the study. Now, there hasn't been a study performed under the guidelines of this act. We know that. Okay? When I brought up Act 605 in the open forum meeting to the attorneys, I mentioned that Act 605 requires a rate study or a mandatory rate study if there are any major development projects. Well, that was hot off the press off the internet, and come to find out, that amendment to that act is still in legislation as of a couple of weeks ago. So there's still changes being made to Act 605. Now, I do believe that the act will be tweaked as they go. And that's exactly why I called this process rushed during the last meeting. Because we don't know what we don't know. And if there hasn't been any municipalities that had a rate study under the Act 605, it's kind of like we're guinea pigs, okay? And those are all my terms there. So back to speaking to the rate study providers. They tell me that any excess monies collected from the tax and after the note is paid or the bond debt is paid will be counted as non-rate revenue. So it sounds all fancy, but from what I understand and what they are saying is that additional tax dollars that are brought in after the note's paid can be accounted for as income in the category of non-metered revenue. And that's really what we want. We want all that tax revenue to be on the balance sheet, if you will. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to break it down, kind of simplify it for us. So let's say you have a house and you rent it out and you have a mortgage on it. You're a landlord, you have a rent house, but you have a note at the bank that you have to pay on this house. The note is $500, but you have renters in there that pay you $800 a month. This leaves you with $300, a spread of $300 that either you can put away each month in case something breaks. And it's not a matter of if, it's when something breaks. Or you know what? You might just say, that extra $300 is extra money for me. I'm just going to spend it. $300. Then you find another rent house you want to buy. So you're getting all your finances together and you go to the bank and the loan officer starts looking at all your documents. Okay? He comes to your debt to income ratio. And the loan officer tells you that he will not consider that you're getting that $300 extra over your rental as income. Only the $500. And you're going to say, well, if you're only going to give me credit for that $500 and I have to pay the bank $500 my note, that's a wash. So in my example, the bank doesn't give you credit for that $300 extra money each month towards your debt to income ratio. And that puts that debt to income ratio totally out of whack. And you're like, what the heck? What's wrong with this picture? Okay. So let's take that same concept. Let's apply the same concept to the city of Glenwood right now. So if they did a rate study right now, the study would not allow the sales tax that is collected in addition to what is collected that goes to the bond service or the overage to be included in our income. Think about that in relation to my example. Our debt to income ratio would definitely be out of whack because they're considering the debt, the bond service debt, and they're considering the money we pay in as taxpayers towards that debt, and that's really a wash. But the extra tax money that's coming in, as the bond is written right now, we don't get credit for that income. Okay? So we know that our debt to income ratio would be out of whack if we had a rate study. Glenwood is collecting more tax revenue today than it did way back when, and that's a good thing. But right now, as the way the bond was written way back when, the monies collected in sales tax revenue, in addition to the debt service payment, the bond repayment, cannot be considered non-rate revenue. We want to consider all the sales tax collected that are dedicated to water and sewer to go towards counting towards income coming in, not just the note or bond repayment. We want our debt to income ratio to be as good as it possibly can be for this rate study. Not just the money from the tax that pays the note and the true metered rate, which is what you get billed for each month, because that's a wash. So if they take the tax money that's coming in and the bills that you pay that's coming in, and the overage of the tax can't go towards income, then that's a wash. Again, we would want all of our tax revenue collected that's dedicated to water and sewer to be taken into account on the rate study. I hope I explained that good enough for people to understand, because it is difficult. It's difficult. I had to sit here and think about it and say, I don't, I need to speak to some more rate study providers. So I have spoken to quite a few, and they all say the same thing. It's the way the bond was written that we cannot consider all of that tax revenue as income on our balance sheet. So it just needs to be rewritten. Okay. Now, speaking of the debt to income ratios, because it's income versus expenses, the building that the water department leases or purchasing or whatever the case may be will be considered debt in the rate study. It's an expense. So we need all of that sales tax that's collected to go towards this rate study on the income side. Okay. Again, my personal opinion is that the rates will increase, and at this point, we're in a position to minimize that. Hopefully, they won't increase. At this point, we can right the wrong, and those are my terms, for the bonds that were set up incorrectly way back when. This would be our opportunity to repurpose or pay off the 2004 and 2006 bonds and get the tax allocation or law written in the proper format that would ensure that all of the tax dollars dedicated to water and sewer are credited to us during a rate study on that income side, not just the bond debt. Remember my example of the landlord. Okay. Now, let me move on to the next point. We all know the interest rates will be higher on new bonds. We know that. That was talked about in the April 24th meeting. So the new bonds are going to be higher than those 2004 and 2006 bonds. So the cost to borrow the money will increase. The interest rate is an unknown because we will not know what that rate's going to be until the bonds are voted in and secured. And who knows what the interest rate's going to be in at that time. In fact, just this week, interest rates were increased by 0.25%. But I did a little digging and I was able to find an actual City of Glenwood bond from the early 90s. And the interest rate on that bond was a heck of a lot higher than what's anticipated for these bonds. And we have more sales tax. Yes, I know that the City of Glenwood will be going into debt about $9 million, and that's inclusive of the $4 to $5 million payoff on the 04 and 06 bonds. And that's a lot of money. But keep in mind that this allows the city to pay those bonds off, secure additional funds for project, with no change in the current sales tax of 1%. And more importantly, it allows consideration for improvement of the debt to income ratio when the rate study is performed, when it's required by the state. Okay. So let's talk about the other half-cent sales tax. Currently, Glenwood has 1.5 cents. So currently, no portion of that sales tax is dedicated to the general fund. The entire half-cent is allocated to the street fund. Now, it was mentioned in that April 24th meeting that instead of the proposed 1/4 cent street fund and 1/4 cent general fund, and that was on this flyer that was given out during that meeting, there was some mention that possibly allocating the whole half-cent to general fund and allowing the council to determine by annual budget how that money is spent. Now, both streets and general funds are important, and dedicating 1/4 cent to streets and 1/4 cent to general fund makes more sense to me. Now, I want to take the opportunity to mention that I am in the insurance industry, and I know that the fire rating process to grade the fire department of the city of Glenwood, grade their fire protection services, is nearing. And it is imperative to maintain that fire rating that we currently have so that our home insurance rates do not increase. As it currently stands, with zero of the sales tax revenue going to the general fund, there would be absolutely no funding for the fire department, and this would not be a good thing. Fire department services are so much more than just firefighting. Their performance actually determines our insurance rates. They are also first responders in emergency situations, and living in a rural community, I can't stress enough the importance of funding a fire department. A police department too, but sometimes the services that fire departments provide in communities are often overlooked. So on Wednesday, May 17th, the mayor and the council of the city of Glenwood will be conducting the meeting for the council to vote whether or not the proposed reallocation will go to the voters in August. Keep in mind that this is the same day that the mayor and the council will know amounts, if any, of water and or sewer grants that may be awarded. Now, when I questioned Mayor Plyler and Mr. Andy Franks in the last meeting, they both mentioned that it was highly doubtful that the city would be awarded grants in this round of awards. Keep in mind that this is simply my understanding of my research. I'm not an attorney. I'm not in the finance business. These are just my opinions. I would like to thank all of the individuals that I've spoken to that have provided me with valuable information so that I can convey this information to you as I interpret it. Most of these individuals would like to remain anonymous, and I appreciate and will respect that. In this process, I've gathered and learned so much that it's difficult to get it all in one YouTube, so I will be preparing another YouTube to get out as soon as I can to give you some more information. Remember, knowledge is power. Have a great rest of your day, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, or you can look me up on my personal Facebook page and send me a private message there. I'll try to help you if I can. Peace.